I'd like to welcome you all to the Disaster Services Technology Communications Workshop. My name is David Sewell. I'm a DST chief. I've been deploying in DST since about 2007. I started out as a service associate and just took classes and developed myself and deployed enough that I eventually worked my way from service associate to supervisor to manager to chief. Oh, generalist managers in there too before chief. So I love teaching these classes, and I'm excited that you all are interested in becoming more involved in DST and deploying. Okay, we make some assumptions about you as a student when you start this class. We assume that you're familiar with the concept of a disaster relief operation, at least on paper, and some of the related vocabulary. Prerequisites for this class, and if you haven't got all these done, you may want to just wait on taking this class and go get these other things done because they're important. In EDGE, which is our learning management system, you need to take Concept of Operations Basics, which is about a 24-minute class, Deployment Fundamentals, which is about a 30-minute class, and Mission Cards Cardholder Overview, which is about a 14-minute class. As a matter of fact, all three of those are videos that you watch of classes that have been taught in the past, but you get all the same information, and then you'll get credit through EDGE for taking those classes. The two disaster services technology on-demand courses in EDGE that we want you to take is DST Overview and Customer Service. And you can get those through EDGE as well. And the way you get to EDGE is you log into your Volunteer Connection page, and you look under your profile picture, and you'll see the word EDGE, and it'll connect you to EDGE. You can go directly to EDGE and try to log in, but it's easier to log into Volunteer Connection, and you have links to go to EDGE and the Exchange, for example. Okay, so after completing this workshop, you will be able to deploy to a disaster relief operation as a communication service associate, knowing what's expected of you. Now, it's understood that you'll need a lot of on-the-job training and mentoring to become proficient in any of our DST activities. So rest assured, we're not just going to toss you out there and expect you to do all these tasks without carefully training you how to do it ahead of time. Okay, we're going to talk about the role of the communications activity, who our customers are, and what services we provide in communications. We're going to learn the basic technologies used on a disaster relief operation in the two main communication areas. And we'll help you understand the expectations and limitations of what the communication activity is. In other words, what we can and can't do. So let me go back one slide. Okay, so when I talk about going to EDGE and Volunteer Connection, if those are foreign terms to you and you're not able to get into Volunteer Connection yet and you haven't taken any of these prerequisites, you need to talk to your volunteer services, also known as disaster workforce engagement person at the chapter, they can help you figure out any challenges that you have with getting into Volunteer Connection and EDGE. So, or you can call the IT help desk and they can help you figure out why you can't get in. So if you have any challenges, please avail yourself of those resources. Volunteer connection is also really important for accessing the DST global group share. And you have to have a DST position, not in Edge, excuse me. You have to have a DST position in Volunteer Connection to be able to access the Disaster Services Technology Global Group Share, which is chock full of resources. So just remember who you need to reach out to help get this done. Okay, so so the role of the communications activity is to provide, install, support, and maintain communications equipment, and we'll go into what that equipment is soon, on a disaster relief operation so everybody could talk together. We want to make sure that we set up communication capability within and between the DR Disaster Relief Operation headquarters, field sites, for example, like warehouses or kitchens, mobile units, radios set up in vehicles, clients, national headquarters in Fairfax, Virginia, and other agencies. This also includes providing radio operators and liaisons to the amateur radio groups supporting the affected area. Okay, this is kind of a sample organization chart for the DST activity. If we have a large operation that covers a lot of geography, or the DR is very complex, we'll have someone that's in kind of an admin role that interfaces with the job director and other operation leadership, and that'll be a DST chief. And they'll spend a lot of time in those meetings and being a liaison and smoothing the road for us to do our work. If it's a smaller level operation that doesn't cover quite as much geography or isn't quite so complex, we'll have what's known as a DST lead. And you'll learn more about this later. We have networking, computer operations, and customer service in DST. Let's talk about the function that we're emphasizing in this class. You'll have a communications manager who's in charge of the whole communications activity and reports to the DST lead or chief. We have some different roles that need to be fulfilled in the communications activity. It doesn't mean we have to have a separate person in each one of these activities. We often won't have enough people to have an individual person in these activities, but I want you to understand the roles that are important in communications. There's communications associate, radio repair associate, amateur radio liaison, two-way radio infrastructure associate, and a radio operator or dispatcher. So the radio repair associate doesn't mean that that person is going to crack radio cases open and fix problems internally with radios. They're going to help primarily in inspecting our emergency response vehicles and helping to repair like the coax cables. If the radio's bad, they'll switch out the whole radio. They won't open the radio and try to figure out what's going on. The amateur radio liaison coordinates with local amateur radio groups. The two-way radio infrastructure associate and the radio operator dispatcher will work to support the other disaster responders in the area in designing, deploying radios, and also teaching radio etiquette and how to use the radios. For the radios that we have, the responders don't have to have a license. The exception is amateur radio. If they're using amateur radios, they have to have an amateur radio license. The blanket license for the low band and other types of radios allows anyone that's in the Red Cross to use those radios. Okay, so we want you as a DST team member to have good customer service skills. You have to be a good people person to work in DST. There's not any job where you can sit in a back room and reset passwords on a server. We all have to work with our fellow responders. We want you to have basic computer experience. You don't have to have extensive experience. We'll teach you, but just some basic computer experience. We want you to have basic understanding of a radio communication system. We'll teach you the anything advanced you need to know. You need to be teachable. You need to have the ability to follow specific written and or verbal instructions. The written instructions come in the form of the disaster technology procedures, the verbal instructions from your lead or manager in communications. We want you to be flexible in your job assignments, expectations, and working hours, because all of those will change and flex throughout the life of the operation. The unofficial motto of the Red Cross is Semper Gumby, always flexible. So how do we know how to do all these cool things in communications? Well, they're written procedures, and our written procedures in DST are called disaster service technology procedures, or disaster technology procedures. You'll learn to love those because they'll help you be really good in the job you're doing. There's detailed procedures on how to perform nearly every task that you need to do in communications. They're on every DRO laptop, but you can also get them in the volunteer connection DST global group share. But you won't be able to get that, like I said, until you've got a GAP assigned, a group activity position assigned in volunteer connection. Networking, computer ops, and customer service also have their own set of disaster technology procedures, and the acronym for that is DTPs. All of the written procedures have been very carefully constructed over the years and updated and made as simple as possible, so you can even do a complex task by following these step by step. Realize that trying to rely on your memory and assuming that you don't need the DTPs can run you into a problem in the respect that we can fix it, but it'll probably take you twice as long to undo what you did wrong and do it right. So just start out and follow them step by step. Okay. So here's a folder on one of the laptops. All the laptops are imaged the same when they come from the Logistics Fulfillment Center. So on the C drive under function forms, DST procedures, CM, which is for communications, all of these procedures are in there. I'm not going to go by them one by one because they change all the time, and I want you to actually go out and dig into these and learn how to do tasks. Okay, here's an example of the structure of a disaster technology procedure. Once again, I'm not going to go into detail, but they're very easy to read. They're organized, and you can't go wrong if you follow these step by step. If you don't understand something in a DTP, talk to your lead, or your mentor and tell them you don't understand. And if you, as you're becoming familiar with the procedures, if you see part of the DTP that could be written better, suggest that to your lead or send an email to dst@redcross.org and tell them how you think the procedure could be better. That we've got an open door policy that way, and we want to benefit from the brains of all of our disaster service technology volunteers. Okay, so who are our customers in communications? We don't interact with Red Cross clients directly. The Red Cross clients are the ones that are impacted by the disaster. Our customers are our fellow Red Cross responders, and all of those responders we help are in all of the groups and activities on the operation. Even if they don't have a computer in front of them or a radio in front of them, all of them are still our customers. And one of the main things that we do when we become more proficient is we teach and mentor responders that are not in the DST activity. Okay, so you might be surprised that in the communication activity, we're also responsible for cellular telephones, satellite phones, and we support IP phones or voice over internet protocol phones, desk phones, and conference phones. We support two-way radio equipment. I'm sure that's no surprise to you. The equipment gets delivered to the operation from the Logistics Fulfillment Center, and then we in turn provide it and make it available for our fellow responders. Radios are kind of specialized, so to make sure that the radios are safe, we'll usually install it and maintain and sometimes operate the radios for people. And we support all kinds of radio related activities, but the one I'm thinking about more than any other is the amateur radio groups. Cellular telephones or cell phones. These are the most common. This is the most common piece of communications equipment on any DRO. Several carriers are used, including AT&T and Verizon. The handsets are shipped to the operation. The handsets that are shipped to the operation are specific to each carrier. So, for example, you can't use an AT&T device on Verizon and vice versa. I will mention that if you're in a particularly isolated area, like a particular rural area, sometimes you may get cell phones from that carrier that we don't stock at the Logistics Fulfillment Center. So if you find that the AT&T or Verizon phones don't work, but they have a local regional cell phone company, you may use their handsets and either rent or they'll loan us the handsets for the length of the operation. Someone at the local chapter or in-kind donations can help you get the equipment that's needed. Here's a Pelican case that shows how our smartphones are shipped out there. You notice shipped to the operation from Georgia. You'll notice that it has picked foam that's taken out precisely in the shape that's needed to keep the phones from shaking around and getting damaged. You have, in the case, you have AC wall chargers and cords, and you have car chargers. Make sure that, and you'll learn the acronyms. So you'll learn by the acronym of on the case what cell phones you have in there, AT&T or Verizon. The phones don't look a lot different from one service to the other. The main thing you'll notice is that they'll have their company logo on the phones, and you can also tell by looking on the activity bar here what service you have. If your that's not always reliable, because if the phone roams in an area, it might have something other than AT&T on there or Verizon. So keep that in mind. Here's a cell phone case with flip phones. Yes, we still use flip phones. If the application that the phones are needed for doesn't require the resources of a smartphone, we'll use the flip phones instead. They're cheaper. If we lost a phone, it wouldn't have as much of a financial impact on us as a smartphone. There's certain instances where flip phones are desirable. For example, if you have a shelter where we're going to provide phones for clients to use, and we can't put an IP phone out there, a flip phone is best. I'm thinking about an operation I was on after the Haiti earthquake, when we had people coming back that were actually U.S. citizens coming back into the country. We had reception centers at airports and seaports, and we allowed the family members coming in to, excuse me, we allowed the traveler to come back in, use these phones to contact their family to have them come and pick them up. So it was less of a risk having the flip phones than the smartphones. Flip phones are assigned to each service, and you'll learn over time with the prefix of the phone number what service it's from. Okay, like I was saying, you need to determine which cell phone provider is best for the area of the disaster. If you're in a chapter or a regional office, you can ask someone in the chapter what works best. If the DR covers a large disaster relief operation, I got to be careful about acronyms. If it covers a large geographical area, you may need 2 different kinds of carriers or more. If cell phone service is down, rest assured that the carriers are highly motivated to restore the service as quickly as possible. Whether that means getting the towers back up and running quickly, or they might bring in COWS, COW, which is a cellular tower on wheels. Kind of a neat trailer. If you raise the mast up and the dish, the cell phone antennas will run off of that mast. And sometimes they'll run off of shore power at where they have the cow established, or they'll have a generator. Okay, so once you've determined which carriers to use, the customer service help desk will help you manage them being issued to responders who need the phones. Red Cross has a policy that you are not to use any mobile device while you're operating a vehicle on an operation, just for the safety factor. So the best thing to do, well, you can do 2 things. We always try to have the buddy system in the Red Cross if someone's going out of the field. So whoever the passenger is will be the one to handle the phone and handle the radio if you got one installed. Please don't change the customizations on the phones, on the cell phones, like the voicemail passwords, and voicemail message, the outgoing message. Please leave it like it is. It's not the end of the world if it gets changed. It just be a delay until we can use the phone with somebody else, because we got to get DST at the dock to Disaster Operation Coordination Center to reset the phones. If you have a Red Cross phone, please feel free to use it to call your family. Let them know that you're safe. Just please don't use the phone so much that it interferes with your ability to do your job. And the other responders are told the same thing. Satellite phones. We have Iridium phones and the corresponding service. Hint, hint, the service is quite expensive. There's a base service plan, and then there's a per minute fee. Last I knew, it was $1, at least $1 a minute. To successfully make a call on a satellite phone, you have to have a clear view of the sky, and the handheld units must have their antennas deployed to work. They have complicated phone numbers. So between the fact that to be able to receive incoming calls, you'd have to be outside all the time waiting, and the fact that the incoming phone number is usually a complex international number that kind of doesn't make it practical. Just remember that the calls are very costly and should be kept to a minimum. These aren't the kind of phones you just call and have a casual conversation with somebody. Mission critical, mission essential communication only. As soon as cell phone service becomes available again, we're going to pull these phones back, get them charged up, and be ready to send back to the logistics fulfillment center. I'm not saying that you don't need to keep a few of these just in case there's more bad weather in the affected area, but just help DST regulate this, and so we can be good stewards of the money that's been donated to get these phones. Okay, so the one exception to using a Iridium sat phone inside a car or inside a building is the antenna adapter that snaps on the back of the phone. This little attachment goes right into the antenna port on the back of the phone, and this antenna plug attaches to the back of the bracket. This is a mag mount antenna. If any of you have had satellite radio in your car, it's the same type of little antenna. You can also use this antenna hanging outside of a window or something. It sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. But that's our Iridium sat phones. Okay, let's talk about radio. This is a low band handheld radio. This is what you would use to communicate in a lot or a small or fairly small area, like a warehouse or a kitchen lot or a bulk distribution lot that doesn't have a lot of range, but it has enough to communicate with the ERVs and coordinate movements. In a kitchen lot or a bulk distribution lot where they're staging activity, there'll be somebody that's in charge. They call them a yard dog. The yard dog will want one of these radios as quickly as possible so he can communicate with the emergency response vehicles and other vehicles that we might have put radios in. We'll establish an antenna. We don't have towers. We got a little picture of a tower here, but we don't get towers from DST at the dock. Okay, so I'll summarize our VHF low band. We have a nationwide radio frequency, which is 4742. All national emergency response vehicles are equipped with that frequency and a couple other frequencies that have tones in them. And I'm trying to think of an example. Oh, in St. Thomas, where we have a Red Cross office, we are putting the finishing touches on a repeater network that will allow communication between St. Thomas, St. John, and Puerto Rico, those Red Cross offices. So when we do that, we get a new code plug for the radio, and we'll have that additional frequency in there, but it'll also have repeater tones in it. So the radios we have are base, mobile, and handhelds for use on the operation. The base radio is meant to sit stationary, big old heavy radio, and the power supply is big and heavy. The mobile radio can go in a vehicle and attach to a cigarette lighter adapter, and we have handhelds. I was telling you about the low band handheld radios. Excuse me. The range will vary depending on antenna height, weather, and terrain. The radios work by line of sight. So if you have a flat terrain where you are, you're going to be golden. You can speak for quite a long distance. If you have hills or mountains or lots of buildings, you're going to have to figure out a way to relay signals. Doesn't mean we're going to deploy a repeater in the area, but in the example of being in a valley between hills, you could put an ERV, emergency response vehicle, on top of a hill, and they can relay messages to the other side. You'll learn how to plan communications. You'll have a band plan and communications, and you'll help the users know how to use it. That's part of what our responsibility in communications is. Okay, so we have a call sign. You'll never need to use that, but we do own a call sign in the Red Cross. Real big deal here. No client or confidential information is to be transmitted by radio. If there's something confidential that needs to be transmitted, we can ask whoever's calling to public service you or call you on your cell phone number so you can transmit it that way, or over email or something other than just talking about it on the radio. Even though we own these frequencies in the Red Cross, there are people that listen to them, and we don't want to do anything that would tarnish the Red Cross image. And if we talked about a client being hurt or they were hurt severely or killed in a disaster, you don't want to talk about that on the radio, because someone could be listening and hear that, and that would be an absolute horrible way to find out. So remember that cardinal rule: no confidential or client information. These days, all about HIPAA and protected health information. None of that can be transmitted over the radio. Okay, so the fixed base station low band, which has an acronym that you'll see on the Pelican case, is FBL, is a 100-watt radio mounted to a power supply, and it comes in a Pelican case. I'll show you a picture of it here in a minute. The radio in the case will come with a coax and a mag mount antenna, and the coax can go to an external antenna outside. You have to have an ALB antenna low band base, acquire fence post or radio mast or something similar to get the antenna up in the air. If you are in a situation where you can't install a mast or tie guy lines out because there's just no way to secure it, thinking about Hurricane Sandy when we were at the Aqueduct racetrack and we had a kitchen set up. It was in the middle of a concrete parking lot, and there wasn't any way to put a mast. So what the management of the racetrack did, because it wasn't in use, is they brought out one of the man lifts, and we secured the antenna to the bar of the basket that we stand in, and every morning we would raise up the man lift to a safe height, and we had the antenna up high enough to communicate to our ERS with a pretty respectably long distance. So you think about custom solutions like this. As long as it's safe and you work it out with your team, go for it and use it. We have some really brilliant people in DST, including each and every one of you, and that can come up with some innovative solutions. Okay, you connect after you get the antenna installed, however, a mast or on the side of a vehicle, or we've used the fencing around a baseball diamond and attached it up high. You connect the coax to the radio, making sure that the radio is either unplugged or turned off. The RF energy can hurt you, and I want you all to be aware of that danger so you can deploy radios safely. Not meaning to scare you, but just RF energy can cause damage to you. This is what the Pelican case looks like that the fixed, the low band fixed base station comes in. On the left here, you can see the coax, and in the plastic bags, there's hose clamps and other supplies you need to deploy the antenna. The reason it's in the case is because the tubes that the antennas come in aren't big enough to hold any of those supplies, so they go in this case. The radio power supply is mounted underneath. Please don't ever take these apart unless you are told to for some unknown mission critical reason, but only do it with the instructions of our communications person at the Logistics Fulfillment Center. This is what the fixed low band base station radio looks like out of the box. It's mounted to the power supply and meant to not come apart. This radio isn't plugged in, and notice that there's no coax run to it yet. It's important that you know that it can damage the radio severely if you press the transmit button with no antenna connected, because it's such a high power radio. So just don't use it until you have an antenna hooked up. This is a picture showing how the antenna, this is a diamond antenna, how it's attached to the fence post with the hose clamps that are in the case. This is an example of an VHF antenna, or the low band antenna, being connected on top of a building at a DRO site. You notice how that is guyed pretty well. Pretty good install. This is one of the projects you may learn how to do. Okay, the low band mobile radio is a bit safer because it is the radio is tuned to only broadcast at 70 watts maximum. It's mounted in a transportable case, comes with a cigarette lighter plug and mag mount base, requires an antenna low band mobile, which is just the antenna whip. It has an NMO mount to screw on, and the magnetic mount is also in the case with the radio. Even though it's turned down to 70 watts, that's still a lot of power. It can still cause some damage. So you want to make sure that you use really good practices with safely installing the radios. If you leave the radio plugged into the cigarette lighter and forget to turn the radio off, unless the vehicle has a protective circuit to shut the power off, you can drain a car battery pretty quick. So make sure that you put something in the vehicle to remind you to turn it off, even if it's a note, post-it note put on the dash. Just make sure you don't leave it turned on. This is what the low band mobile Pelican case looks like. Notice that there's no foam in this one. The mag mount antenna and coax goes in a Ziploc bag and fits under the front of the radio. You notice it's tilted up, so you can get that get those items underneath it. Okay, so I talked about a little bit about the low band handheld radios. These are handheld, they're battery operated. They use a lot of AA batteries. They operate on the same frequency or frequencies as our emergency response vehicles and our base station. These have a much shorter range than our other radios. But like I said, it's useful for short range communications with the base stations or low band radios in the vehicles. They're packed into a case. One of the first things you do for either this one or the UHF radio is submit a 6409 to request additional AA batteries. When just something, you may not remember this from here to when you first get out and work with the radio, but be careful about how you take the battery compartment apart. This one slides off the bottom of the radio, and be careful how it kind of opens like a clamshell. Be careful how you do that, because it's easy to break the clip that connects the two sides of the battery compartment. Okay, in communications, we're responsible for maintaining the permanently mounted radios and PA systems in the emergency response vehicles. We have, you can request a radio analysis kit, and please do request this if you have a lot of errors that you're going to need to check on the operation, because without the antenna analyzer and some of the other test equipment, you can only functionally test the radio to see if someone else can hear you. But there may be more detailed problems that you need the analyzer to tell what it is. And you'll be taught how to use this. Okay, so radio maintenance requires hands-on training. We're going to help you. We most, if not all, radio guys love what they do, and they love to share about what they do. For those of you that aren't amateurs, a Mentor in amateur radio is called an Elmer. I don't know where that term came from, but the people that are proficient in radio, in DST, we kind of like to think of them as our Red Cross Elmers to teach new people on how to use and work on the radios. Okay, so we inspect the radio systems and the PA systems on the emergency response vehicles. So we inspect them when they arrive on the operation. Um, the reason we do that when they arrive is sometimes the chapters that they're assigned to don't have anyone there that can inspect and repair radio problems when an operation, disaster relief operation, is not going on. So sometimes some problems need to be fixed before they can be used on the operation. So you can get all the parts you need to work on the radios from the Logistics Fulfillment Center. Some parts are pretty standard for us to keep an extra one in, like the radio analyzer kit, the antenna aerial, the ball, spring, and ferrule, including the alignment of that antenna, the whip antenna, working on the radio control head and speaker, the PA system, the wiring. You'll learn to get a trained eye so you can check these things out pretty quickly. We make sure that the emergency response vehicle radio and PA systems are working properly. Like I said, be careful of radio frequency, energy. There's lots of resources online about what I'm talking about with getting hurt with RF radiation. And some of the damage that does is something you won't know for quite a while. So just don't even worry about it. Just don't even do something that make you worry about that. Just be safe from the very beginning. Okay, proper radio etiquette's really important. People not sharing personal and protected information. No cursing on the radio. Learning how to speak in plain language rather than thinking back to your CB days where you use 10 codes or other code words. Because of reduced transmission distance with the radios, even if we did allow using code words, it wouldn't work very well because we probably couldn't understand what they were saying, and we'd please say repeat and several times. So if we're in plain text, just talking in plain text, there's a better chance of the receiving party understanding what we're saying. Okay, here's a picture of one of our older traditional ERVs. This is the radio bolted to the wall behind the driver's seat. Notice that there's no control head here. This little adapter thing has wires that interface with the main radio and that goes under the seat all the way to the front and connects to the control head for the Vertex. This is called the doghouse, this container that has all the electronics in it. Where it got the name the doghouse, I don't know. If you need to do any work on the PA system, you'll need to undo all these screws and lift up this piece and work on the PA, the Wayland box that's underneath. Okay, UHF handhelds. They have assigned frequencies that are programmed into them, but they are shared frequencies. So you need to email DST at the Disaster Operation Coordination Center and tell them the zip code and the address where you are, and they'll look up and they'll send you back frequency numbers that you can use on the radio. It's a turn dial that goes from 1 to 10, so they'll tell you which frequency that you can select and use. And if they have it, they'll give you 2 or 3, so you have a couple alternates. They're good for short-range communication. For example, inside a building There's lots of walls. We are to make sure that in DST we establish rapid response to issues. Sometimes we'll use these in our headquarters, and the person that's at the customer service desk will have a radio, and they'll call out, say so and so on the third floor can't get their computer to boot up. It's really useful for that. They're packed 10 to a case, and they're packed with AA batteries. The AA batteries go in the old UHF handheld and the low band handheld. So the first thing you want to do when you open a case is order more batteries, because you'll go through a lot of them. This is the box that the UHF handhelds come in. Red Cross has access to other radio systems and frequencies that are used rarely, but they are available. They're not found on a typical disaster relief operation, but if we end up needing it, they're available. The systems include FEMA, shares, ARC HF channels, and various amateur systems and associations. These aren't real common systems to use on an operation, but the point is that we do have some custom systems that we can use to help us in particular communication scenarios. I talked about our amateur radio operators. They can be an invaluable local asset in the affected area. So those relationships need to be established before the disaster ever occurs. We have a memorandum of understanding between the Amateur Radio Relay League and the Red Cross to help facilitate those relationships. And usually there's at least one DST person that's an amateur radio operator that can help serve as the liaison between the two groups. But it can also be, this position can also be filled by anybody, and they just won't. You won't ever, if you put someone in this position that doesn't have an amateur radio license, they'll just handle the liaison roles, but they won't ever talk on the amateur radio. Okay, like I was just saying, you don't have to have an amateur radio license to be in the communications activity, but having one helps and allows you to communicate directly with other amateurs using the amateur radio kits that we send out. And just ask one of us. We'll help you. Ask one of the amateur radio operators, and we'll help you learn how to become one yourself. Getting the license isn't expensive, but then when you choose the type of radio you want, sometimes that can get pricey. Okay, here's what the amateur radio kit looks like. There's two to a box. They're mounted on the power supply. It comes with the coax for each radio, the mag mount, and everything you need. The radios are not programmed. That's something you have to do if you want to use it on the ground. Okay, so throughout the life of the operation, double check and triple check the equipment that you've issued. It'll all be maintained in our inventory system, but we perform audits throughout the operation to make sure that we haven't lost anything. Let's talk about the 15-minute rule. If you plug away at something for 15 minutes or longer, you're probably not going to solve it. So it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your knowledge. It could be that the piece of equipment is broken, or there's some new procedure that we didn't get told about yet. So if you hit 15 minutes, reach out and get help. It doesn't make you look bad, for lack of a better way of putting it, to have to ask for help. If you have issues that come up, whether it's personnel or equipment or infrastructure, escalate those issues to your communications supervisor or manager. When you get to a disaster relief operation, start your planning on how to shut it down as soon as you start the operation. Most often, when it's time to pack everything up, the job director and the logistics assistant director will tell you that you're going to be closing down, usually with not much notice. So have a plan in place on how to shut things down. Okay. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. My email address is david.sewell@redcross.org. You can also, there's a couple other email addresses you can reach out to. dst@redcross.org or dst101@redcross.org. If you have questions, please reach out and ask. If you have a challenge with your volunteer services person at the chapter, getting a gap, or if they don't understand about this class process and how we, quote, approve you to be ready to go, let us know. I really personally appreciate all of you being here for the class. I look forward to seeing hopefully all of you out on an operation to help our team out. Thank you so very much, and have a great day.